There is a creature living in millions of homes around the world who has quietly mastered something that most humans spend entire lifetimes struggling to find. It doesn't go to therapy, it doesn't read self-help books, it doesn't lie awake at 3 a.m. replaying conversations, wondering if it said too much, gave too much, asked for too little. It simply is, fully, unapologetically, without explanation. You probably know one. You may even live with one. And if you are someone who has survived a relationship that slowly taught you that your needs were too much, your feelings were too loud, and your presence was something that required constant justification, then I want to suggest something that might sound unusual at first. The cat has something to teach you, not as a metaphor, not as a cute observation, as a genuine philosophical guide to the life you are trying to rebuild. Watch a cat for 10 minutes, and you will see something remarkable. It does not perform. When it wants affection, it asks for it directly, without apology. When it has had enough, it leaves without guilt, without explanation, without looking back to make sure you are not upset. It stretches when it needs to stretch. It sleeps when it needs to sleep. It plays with complete abandon and then stops mid-game simply because the interest has passed. No justification, no performance, no monitoring of your reaction to decide whether its own feelings are acceptable. The philosopher Alan Watts once observed that the problem with human beings is that we spend enormous energy watching ourselves live instead of simply living. We are always the audience of our own experience, judging, editing, adjusting the performance based on what we think others need to see. The cat has never learned this particular suffering, and you somewhere along the way learned it so thoroughly that it began to feel like your natural state. It isn't. It never was. Here is the first thing the cat knows that took you years to unlearn. Your needs are not a negotiation. When a cat is hungry, it does not wonder whether this is a convenient time for you. It does not apologize for the inconvenience. It does not build a case for why food is reasonable before asking for it. It simply communicates what is true. Now think about what happened to you inside a toxic relationship. Think about how many times you softened a need before expressing it. How many times you prefaced a feeling with, "I know this is probably silly, but..." How many times you monitored the other person's mood before deciding whether your own inner experience was allowed to exist out loud. You were trained gradually, persistently to treat your needs as requests that required approval, as burdens that needed justification, as things that were only valid if the other person agreed they were reasonable. The cat was never trained this way, and watching one, you begin to remember something your body knew before your history rewrote it. You were allowed to need things. You always were. There is a story told about a Zen monk who kept a cat. Students would come to him with questions about enlightenment, about how to find peace, how to release suffering, how to stop fighting with reality. The monk would often say nothing for a long time. Then he would simply gesture toward the cat, curled in the corner, sleeping in a patch of sunlight. "Study that," he would say. "It has already arrived where you were trying to go." The students laughed, usually. They thought he was being evasive. But the ones who actually sat and really watched, eventually understood. The cat was not happy because its life was easy. Cats have hard lives. They get cold. They get hungry. They face uncertainty and discomfort and loss like everything else that lives. But the cat does not add a second layer of suffering on top of the first. It does not lie in the cold and tell itself a story about how this means something is fundamentally wrong with it. It does not feel hunger and conclude that it is unworthy of being fed. It simply feels what it feels, moves through it, returns to rest. The monk was pointing at something that the great spiritual traditions have tried to name for centuries. The Buddhists call it non-attachment. The Stoics called it equanimity. Rumi called it the reeds, longing the willingness to feel fully without being destroyed by feeling. The cat simply lives it. The second thing the cat knows that took you years to unlearn. Boundaries are not cruelty. Have you ever tried to hold a cat that didn't want to be held? It doesn't argue with you. It doesn't explain its position. It doesn't feel guilty for inconveniencing you. It simply, with complete calm and zero drama, removes itself from the situation. And here's the extraordinary part: it bears no grudge. 5 minutes later, it may come and sit beside you entirely on its own terms. Not because it is confused, not because it forgot, because the limited. Set was never about punishment. It was simply about truth. I don't want this right now, so I am choosing something else. Think about what that would have looked like in your life. Think about the moments you stayed when your body was screaming to leave. The conversations you continued long past the point of usefulness because leaving felt unkind. The relationship you remained inside of, shrinking by degrees because walking away felt like a cruelty you could not inflict. The cat has no such confusion. It understands, at a cellular level, something it took you tremendous pain to learn. Leaving is not the same as abandoning, and a limit is not the same as a wall. The cat comes back on its own terms, in its own time, with its whole heart. That is not coldness. That is integrity. Here is something researchers have discovered about cats that most people don't know. For centuries, we assumed cats were fundamentally solitary, that they tolerated humans but didn't truly attach. Recent studies in animal psychology have overturned that assumption entirely. Cats form deep, secure attachment bonds. They know their owner's voice from dozens of others. They monitor our emotional states. They adjust their behavior in response to our distress. They simply express this attachment quietly. They don't perform their love. They don't seek constant validation that the love is being received correctly. They don't become anxious when you leave and desperate when you return. They trust, steadily, simply, without theater. Psychologists have a term for this kind of attachment: secure. And it is. Research consistently shows the attachment style most associated with genuine well-being, the ability to love without losing yourself, to connect without becoming dependent, to care without making another person's response the measure of your worth. It is also, not coincidentally, the attachment style that toxic relationships most systematically destroy. You were likely not born anxiously attached. You learned it. You learned it in an environment where love was inconsistent, where warmth came and went unpredictably, where you had to monitor constantly and perform continuously just to maintain connection. The cat is showing you something you were before that learning began. A creature capable of deep love who nevertheless remains, quietly and completely, itself. The third thing the cat knows that took you years to unlearn: rest is not laziness. Solitude is not loneliness. A cat sleeps, on average, 16 hours a day. Not because it is depressed, not because it is avoiding something, but because it has an entirely undamaged relationship with its own need for stillness. It does not feel guilty for resting. It does not justify the nap. It does not lie in the sunlight while mentally composing a list of all the things it should be doing instead. It simply rests, completely, without apology. Now think about the last time you gave yourself real rest, not collapse, not exhaustion finally winning, but genuine, chosen, unashamed stillness. For many people healing from toxic relationships, rest feels dangerous. The relationship may have taught you that your value was in your usefulness. That love was something you earned through giving. That stillness made you a burden. That your needs for quiet, for space, for simply being without producing were inconveniences to be managed rather than truths to be honored. The cat has never believed any of this. It rests because rest is real. It seeks solitude because solitude restores. It sits in silence not because it has nothing to offer, but because silence, to the cat, is not emptiness. It is fullness. The mystic Thomas Merton wrote, "In silence, God ceases to be an object and becomes an experience." We might say it this way for our purposes. In silence, the self ceases to be a performance and becomes a presence. The cat lives in that presence always. You are learning your way back to it, a moment I want you to sit with. Somewhere perhaps in your home right now, perhaps in a memory, there is a cat doing something very simple. Maybe it is sitting at a window, watching the world outside with complete, unhurried attention, not wishing it were somewhere else, not planning, not regretting, simply present to the particular quality of this exact light, this exact moment. The Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh spent decades teaching people to do what that cat is doing naturally. He called it interbeing, the art of being so fully present to what is that the boundary between self and world becomes, briefly, permeable. Most humans get there, if they get there at all, after years of practice. The cat never left. And perhaps the reason so many people who have been through profound pain find themselves drawn to cats, feel inexplicably comforted by their presence, healed in some quiet way by simply sharing a space with them, is precisely this. The cat is modeling something the healing soul is desperately trying to. Remember, that presence is possible, that peace is real, that you can be fully yourself, needing what you need, feeling what you feel, resting when you need to rest, leaving when you need to leave, and still be worthy of love. Not despite those things, because of them. 4 quiet lessons from the cat for the healing heart. 1 practice, 1 need without apology today. Not a demand, not a performance. Simply 1 true thing you need: rest, space, a conversation, silence expressed without softening, without preface, without waiting for permission. Notice what happens in your body when you do. 2, practice 1 boundary without explanation. The next time something doesn't feel right, try saying so simply. Not with a case built around it. Not with apologies lacing through it. Just, I'm not comfortable with this. And then Like the cat, let that be enough. 3, give yourself one unearned rest. Not rest you collapsed into, not rest you earned through productivity, rest you chose. A deliberate, unashamed hour of stillness reading, sitting in sunlight, watching something beautiful simply because you are a living being, and living beings need rest. That is all the justification required. 4, practice returning. One of the most profound things about cats is that they leave and they come back. They set limits and they still love. They protect their energy and they remain connected. Practice the wholeness of this. Healing does not mean closing. It means learning to open on your own terms. Here is what I want to leave you with. There is an old Celtic saying, "Beware of those who have no softness for animals." The intuition behind it is ancient and true, that something essential about the fine soul is revealed in how it relates to creatures who cannot advocate for themselves, who cannot perform for approval, who simply exist as they are. But I want to offer the other side of that wisdom today. Be gentle with yourself the way you are gentle with a cat, with the same patience, the same lack of judgment, the same willingness to simply let the creature be what it is, need what it needs, rest when it rests, leave when it must leave. You have been through something that taught you to be the hardest on yourself, most critical of your own needs, most dismissive of your own instincts, most demanding of your own performance. The cat sitting in the corner has never once judged itself for needing warmth, has never once apologized for taking up space, has never once decided that its own comfort was less important than someone else's convenience. It knows something you are learning, something that was true about you long before anyone convinced you otherwise. You were made for warmth. You were made for rest. You were made for love that does not require you to disappear inside it. The cat already knows this, and slowly, gently, watching the quiet confidence of a creature who never forgot its own worth, so are you beginning to remember. If this reached something in you today, leave it in the comments. Even one word. You are not as alone in this as it sometimes feels. And if you want to keep healing through stories, psychology, and the quiet wisdom of the world around us, subscribe. There is more here for you. Rest well. You have earned it. And even if you haven't, you are allowed it anyway.